the philosopher who changed the world with his pen. Karl Marx, could he have been a giant-infused being? I can hear you saying, no way. I had the same reaction when I first encountered this claim. But in recent years, this question has increasingly circulated on social media. That's why I decided to dive into the claims and create a research dossier for you. And what I discovered was chilling. Brace yourself, because the story of Karl Marx's shadowed life will astonish you. Karl Marx was born on May 5th, 1818, in Trier, Germany. Despite being born into a Jewish family, his father Heinrich Marx converted to Protestantism due to societal pressures. This created a rupture in Karl's religious identity during his childhood. But what's truly striking is that, from an early age, Marx didn't just reject religion, he infused his writings with dark, demonic motifs. As a young man, Marx studied philosophy and literature at university. His poetry and plays were far from ordinary youthful experiments. In his theatrical work, Ulanem, themes of death, curse, and annihilation dominated. Even the title itself caught the attention of scholars. On was a variation of Emonu, a corrupted, demonic version of a sacred name. Many researchers believe this indicates Marx consciously engaged with satanic symbols from his youth. Of course, this is not universally accepted. Some historians argue that Marx merely used a gloomy style fitting his era. His works, however, repeatedly explored themes like lovers taking their own lives, characters selling their souls to the devil, and summoning infernal powers. Marx appropriated lines from Faust, particularly the words of Mephistopheles. All that exists deserves to perish. He turned this into a central motto of his philosophy. These lines were more than literary references. They resonated like a dark summons, echoing in Marx's mind. In his poetry, he wrote, "I have lost paradise. My soul belongs not to God, but to hell." Were these just the melancholic musings of a poet, or confessions whispered to Marx by unseen entities? Those close to him seemed to sense something darker. In 1837, his father Heinrich wrote in a letter that he suspected his son was under the influence of a demon. Friedrich Engels described Marx as a creature possessed by 10,000 demons. When they first met, his son Edgar addressed him as "my dear demon," and his wife Jenny sometimes referred to him as her occasional evil servant. Were these merely metaphors, or did those around him feel the invisible darkness circling Marx? All of these signs suggest that Marx's youth shaped him not only as a thinker, but also as a figure entwined with dark forces. Every line he wrote seemed less a service to humanity than a call to being itself. When Marx and Engels met in London in 1847, they wrote one of history's most dangerous texts, the Communist Manifesto, published for the first time in 1848. This manifesto was only a few pages long, yet it would profoundly influence millions and shape the bloody course of world history. Supporters viewed it as a call for worker liberation. Critics saw it as one of the most lethal ideologies humanity had ever encountered. Its language was remarkable. While containing economic analysis, many argue that the manifesto spirit invoked destruction and hatred. Marx did not merely advocate for change, he insisted that everything existing should be obliterated at its root. This reflected the dark, poetic line from his youth. All that exists deserves to perish. The manifesto was not just about economics. It challenged the fundamental values of humanity. Marx and Engels explicitly called for the abolition of family, private property, religion, and morality. Some interpreted the manifesto not as a political program, but as a destructive strike against the very foundations of human civilization. Presented almost like a sacred text, it glorified rebellion against the divine, aiming to overthrow God himself. Was this hatred the result of personal choice, or the poison of unseen forces infiltrating Marx's soul? History shows the consequences. In the 20th century, Marx's ideas were implemented by Lenin, Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot. Millions perished. 20 million in the Soviet Union, 65 million in China, 2 million in Cambodia, 2 million in North Korea, 1 million in Eastern Europe, 1.7 million in Africa, and countless others, nearly 100 million victims in total. These figures cannot simply be explained by political failure. It is as though the dark call, whispered into Marx's pen, reverberated across generations, feeding on human blood. Even though millions embraced his ideas, critics have asked, was Marx a man whose unseen guidance sought blood across the world? His writings did not just justify violence. Some perceived them as sanctifying it. Aeon se doble rot. The death throes of society and the bloody birth pangs of the new order can only be shortened through revolutionary terror. These words were less a cold observation than a prophecy, seemingly dictated by another power. Some even call the Manifesto a curse heralding the severance from God, the destruction of moral and religious values, and the advent of bloody revolutions. Meanwhile, Marx's personal life crumbled under this same shadow. While attempting to reshape the world, Marx's family endured tragedy. 6 children, 4 of whom died young, and the surviving 2 daughters later took their own lives. The eerie similarity between his poems about lovers poisoning themselves and the deaths of his daughters is striking. Marx lived in poverty, surrounded by filth and decay, neglecting hygiene and basic care. His friends described him as a being haunted by unseen darkness. The home he shared with Ginny became a place of suffering and despair. Marx's writings, infused with satanic imagery, were not confined to paper. They seemed to manifest in his reality. While his revolutionary ideas brought global upheaval, his personal world only knew death, misfortune, and tragedy. An invisible hand appeared to punish him and his lineage. The man who called for the destruction of the world first burned down his own home, the gravestones of his children, the tragic ends of his daughters, and the existence of a hidden, illegitimate child all testified to the darkness that overshadowed his life. The central question remains: was Karl Marx merely a philosopher, or was he truly an agent of dark, jinn-like forces, using the guise of social reform to spread destruction? Were his revolutionary ideas a form of liberation, or were they the whispers of unseen entities transcribed onto paper? Perhaps the answer lies in the lines he wrote in his youth. My soul belongs not to God, but to hell. I want to destroy the world, overthrow the Creator, ravage the world with black lust, and turn humanity against God. Critics argue that by combining his youthful poetry with political texts, Marx sought destruction and chaos. Yet academic historians emphasize that his early writings may reflect the spirit of a personal, eternal struggle, separate from political theory. Karl Marx died on March 14, 1883, in London, in his room, leaving a world transformed by his ideas. He was buried in Highgate Cemetery, but his grave never found peace. Initially forgotten in a quiet corner, it was later replaced with a massive monument. Since then, however, his resting place has been repeatedly attacked. Stones broken, inscriptions erased. Some see this as a sign that his ideas are still alive. Others believe Marx's soul never found rest. Today, the question circulating on social media whether Karl Marx was a Guinan-fused being remains unanswered. Only God knows the truth. What is undeniable, however, is that he lived in a dark world. For some, he is a symbol of freedom. For others, a harbinger of human suffering and destruction. What do you think about Karl Marx? Share your thoughts in the comments.